Emily Harper never imagined she'd be living back at home at 27 after leaving Seattle and the end of a 3-year relationship that drained her spirit. She returned to Vermont with a single suitcase and a heart full of quiet heartbreak. Her mother had remarried while she was away to a kind, quiet man named Thomas Rivers. Along with him came his son, Ethan, 3 years older than Emily and nothing like she expected. Ethan had recently moved from Toronto to be closer to his father. And now, both of them were suddenly under one roof to strangers with nothing in common but a shared living space and a complicated new family dynamic. Emily tried to settle into the rhythm of the new, but it wasn't easy. Her mom was happy, always humming around the kitchen. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't belong anywhere anymore, not in her old relationship. Not in this new version of home, and especially not around Ethan, who seemed to carry silence around like a shield. He wasn't rude. In fact, he was polite too polite. He greeted her in the mornings, nodded at the dinner table, and offered to help carry groceries. But he never asked questions, never lingered in conversations. They moved around each other carefully, like two puzzle pieces from different sets. Still, Emily noticed things. Ethan always took the trash out without being asked. He brewed coffee at exactly 7 a.m., the scent filling the kitchen just as she was waking up. He fixed the loose cabinet hinge without a word. He wasn't trying to impress her. He just did things. Quietly, thoughtfully. It frustrated her a little, how calm he was. How unaffected he seemed. Then came the night everything shifted. It had been a long day. A particularly difficult conversation with her ex had left Emily feeling raw. After dinner, she stepped outside into the chilly evening air, hoping the dark would hide the tears on her face. She sat on the back steps, arms wrapped around her knees, breathing in the silence. She didn't hear Ethan approach. He didn't say much, just quietly sat down beside her. "Are you okay?" he asked gently after a few minutes. Emily wiped at her face, trying to smile. "Yeah, just tired." She expected him to leave after that. Instead, he stayed. Didn't press. Didn't offer advice. Just sat there, his presence steady and quiet. Like the stars above them, the next morning she found a mug of coffee waiting on the porch swing. Her favorite kind vanilla creamer, no sugar. No note. No explanation. She stared at it for a long moment, heart unexpectedly full. From that day on, something subtle began to change. Their conversations grew a little longer. They started running into each other more often on purpose, it seemed. Emily asked about his job. He worked remotely in marketing. And he asked about her teaching work at the local elementary school. She noticed he always listened when she talked. Not just nodding, but really listening, his eyes focused. His replies thoughtful. One evening, she came home late to find him fixing the leaky kitchen faucet. He looked up, smiled faintly, and said, "It was bothering your mom. Thought I'd take care of it." "Thanks," she replied, watching him work. "You've single quotes handy." He chuckled. "Better than paying a plumber." She laughed too. It felt easy for once. Still, they weren't close. Not yet. There was a gentle distance between them, one neither of them dared cross. Emily wasn't sure if it was because of the step-sibling label or the fact that she was still healing, but there was something unspoken in the air whenever they were alone. A tension that wasn't uncomfortable, but definitely there. One night, a storm rolled through. Heavy thunder, sharp lightning, and the kind of rain that drowned out thoughts. Emily had always hated storms. They made her feel small, unsettled. She curled up in the living room, hugging a blanket. Her mom and Thomas were out of town for the weekend, and she was trying not to feel too alone. A few minutes later, Ethan walked in, holding a second blanket. "I figured you might hate this weather," he said. Sitting on the opposite couch, she glanced at him. "How'd you know?" "You were gripping your phone like it might save you." She laughed softly. It might. They stayed like that, the storm raging outside while the silence between them softened. Eventually, she said, "You don't have to sit with me." "I know," he replied, "but I want to." That was the moment something in her shifted. She began to look at Ethan differently, not just as her stepbrother, but as someone who saw her. Not the broken version her ex left behind. Not the quiet guest in her own home. But just Emily in the days that followed. She found herself noticing the way he smiled when he thought no one was looking, how he took his coffee black, how he read late into the night. She learned he played guitar, but only when he thought the house was empty. She caught a glimpse of his old sketchbook once he used to draw in college, before work took over his life. She saw his kindness everywhere in the way he treated her mom, the way he fixed things without being asked, and the way he always remembered the smallest things she said that one evening. They ended up sitting on the back porch again, watching fireflies dance in the dark. I used to think coming back here was a failure, Emily admitted quietly, like I'd lost something. Ethan glanced at her. And now? She shrugged. Now, I don't know. It feels like maybe I came back to find something I didn't know I needed. He didn't respond, just nodded like he understood exactly what she meant. As the night grew colder, he stood up and offered her his sweater. She hesitated before taking it, pulling it over her head. It smelled like him, clean, warm, familiar. Thanks, she whispered. He smiled. Any time. And for the first time since she returned, Emily felt like maybe home wasn't a place. Maybe it was a person. Someone who saw her. Someone who stayed, even when he didn't have to. Emily started to notice Ethan more not in a sudden, overwhelming way, but little things that slowly built up inside her. He was always around, quietly watching, helping, without being asked. The small gestures that she once overlooked became impossible to ignore. It was like he was trying to bridge the distance between them, but on his own terms, in his own calm, steady way. After the storm night, things didn't immediately change between them, but there was a new ease, a soft undercurrent of connection that wasn't there before. Emily found herself looking forward to the quiet moments they shared the coffee in the morning. The way Ethan would silently hand her a plate when she was busy, or fix something that had been broken for weeks. One afternoon, she came home exhausted after teaching a group of lively second graders. Her feet ached and her head was heavy from trying to keep up with their endless questions. The last thing she wanted was to cook dinner, but when she opened the door, the smell of something warm and inviting filled the air. The kitchen lights were dimmed low, candles flickering softly on the table. On the counter sat a small casserole dish and a note written in Ethan's neat handwriting. Dinner's in the oven. Thought you might be too tired to cook. Love, E. Emily stared at the note, feeling a strange rush of warmth. It wasn't a grand romantic gesture, but it was exactly what she needed that day. For the first time in a while, someone had thought about her without being asked. She ate slowly, savoring the meal, and glanced toward the living room where Ethan sat reading. He looked up, gave her a small smile, and went back to his book. It was simple and understated, but the meaning was clear. He cared even if he didn't say it out loud. Their conversations grew more natural too. They talked about small things, favorite movies, childhood memories, books they loved. Emily learned that Ethan had grown up in Toronto, loved hiking in the mountains, and had a soft spot for classic rock music. He learned about her love of painting, her dreams of traveling, and the heartbreak that brought her back home one evening. After a long week, Emily found Ethan sitting on the porch, strumming a guitar softly. She didn't expect to see him like that, vulnerable and open in the fading light. She sat beside him, and for the first time he let her hear a song he'd written years ago but never shared with anyone. It was raw, filled with longing and quiet hope. Emily felt tears prick her eyes but didn't say a word. The music spoke for both of them. Ethan's steady presence became her anchor. When she was overwhelmed by memories of her past, he was there not to fix her, but just to hold space for her feelings. She never felt judged or rushed around him. For once, she could breathe. There was one night that stayed with her, a night when she was caught in a moment of unexpected sadness. A fight with her mother had left her feeling isolated and lost. She stepped outside into the backyard, rain starting to fall softly. Emily stood there, feeling the cold droplets on her skin, her heart heavy with doubt and loneliness. Ethan appeared beside her without a word. He didn't offer advice or try to change how she felt. Instead, he wrapped his jacket around her shoulders, silent and steady. She leaned into him, grateful for the quiet comfort. That night, words weren't needed. His presence was enough. Days passed, and Emily realized she was beginning to rely on Ethan's quiet support. It was strange. It's the way her heart started to notice him, the way it fluttered when their hands accidentally brushed or when he looked at her with something more than just kindness in his eyes. She wasn't sure what to make of it. She had never thought of him in that way before. He was family, or at least he was supposed to be. One afternoon, they got caught in a sudden spring rain while walking back from the grocery store. They ran for cover under a porch, laughing as they shook off the water. Emily looked at Ethan, her wet hair plastered to her face, and something inside her shifted. There was warmth there that wasn't just from the sweater he shared. They spent more time together after that, watching movies late into the night, sharing stories, and sometimes sitting in silence, just enjoying the calm. It was in those moments Emily realized how much she missed having someone who truly saw her, someone who wanted to be near her without expecting anything in return. Ethan, for his part, seemed to be changing too. He smiled more, relaxed around her, and opened up about his own past heartbreaks and disappointments. They were both healing together but apart, building something fragile yet promising. One night, as spring faded into summer, Emily came home to find the living room filled with soft candlelight and a homemade dinner waiting for her on the table. Ethan stood nearby, looking nervous but hopeful. "I thought you might like a break," he said quietly. She smiled, feeling her heart swell. In that moment, everything between them, years of distance, heartbreak, uncertainty, felt less important than the simple truth. They cared for each other deeply. Emily realized that Ethan wasn't just her stepbrother. He was someone she could trust, someone who could understand the pieces of her she was still trying to put back together. Their connection was no longer quiet gestures and stolen moments. It was becoming something real, something neither of them could ignore. And as they sat together that evening, a soft glow of candlelight between them, Emily felt a fragile hope bloom in her heart. Maybe this unexpected family was where she was meant to be all along. But just as she was beginning to believe in new beginnings, a quiet question lingered in the air. How far would Ethan's feelings go? And could she risk opening her heart again, knowing the complications that came with their new family ties? The answer wasn't clear yet, but one thing was certain. Their story was only just beginning. Emily's life was slowly changing in ways she hadn't expected. The quiet moments with Ethan, the soft smiles, and the gentle conversations began to build something new. Between them, a connection that was deeper than new friendship, but still unspoken. It was confusing and exciting all at once. She tried to ignore the way her heart quickened when he looked her way, or the warmth she felt when their hands accidentally brushed. It felt dangerous, too complicated to understand. After all, he was her stepbrother now. And that fact weighed heavily in her mind. Spring was turning into early summer, and Emily found herself thinking more about Ethan than she cared to admit. She kept telling herself that it was just familiarity, that their time living together had brought them closer as family. But late at night, when the house was quiet, she'd lie awake wondering if it was something more. The thought made her nervous, but also gave her hope. She hadn't felt in a long time. Ethan seemed to sense her hesitation, but never pushed. He was patient and kind, always careful with his words and actions. Like he understood that the boundaries between them were fragile. Sometimes he'd look at her with a softness that made her breath catch, and then quickly turn away as if afraid of what those feelings might mean. Her birthday was approaching, and Emily didn't plan to celebrate. The last few years had left her guarded, and she didn't want to pretend she was happy. She told everyone it was just another day, nothing special. She wanted to keep it simple, maybe even invisible. But Ethan had other ideas. On the morning of her birthday, Emily left for work with a small knot of worry in her stomach. She wasn't expecting anything, and that was fine. She told herself she didn't need anyone to make her day special. But when she came home that evening, everything was different. The house was quiet, but soft music played from the living room. When she stepped inside, the dim glow of string lights and candles wrapped the room in warmth. There was a small cake on the coffee table, homemade, imperfect, with happy birthday written in slightly crooked icing. And standing in the middle of it all was Ethan, looking nervous but hopeful. Emily froze. She hadn't expected this. She wasn't sure if she was supposed to laugh or cry or just smile. "I know you said you didn't want a party," Ethan said softly, rubbing the back of his neck. "But I thought maybe you still deserved to be celebrated." Her heart ached. No one had ever done something so thoughtful for her. Not even her own family in recent years. The gesture wasn't grand or flashy, it was quiet and honest. And that made it all the more meaningful. Emily sat down, overwhelmed with emotion. For the first time in a long time, she laughed a real laugh that came from deep inside. Ethan smiled, relief flooding his face. They ate the cake together, sharing stories and memories as the night grew darker. Later, they sat by the fireplace, the flickering flames casting gentle shadows on the walls. Emily poured them each a glass of wine, the kind she rarely allowed herself to drink. The room was warm, safe, and for a moment, the past and future seemed to fade away. "Why did you do all this?" she asked quietly, her eyes searching his face. Ethan hesitated, then looked down at his glass. "Because you're worth it," he said simply, "even if you don't see it yet." His words touched her in a way she hadn't expected. It wasn't just about the birthday, it was about everything they'd been through together. The long talks, the quiet support, the way he'd been there without ever demanding anything. That night, something shifted between them. The walls they'd built around their feelings started to crumble. Emily realized that she didn't just feel comfort around Ethan, she felt something deeper, something tender and real. But the idea scared her too. She had been hurt before. She had learned to protect her heart, to keep it locked away. And now, here was Ethan, breaking down those walls with quiet gestures and gentle words. The days that followed were filled with new emotions. Emily found herself stealing glances at Ethan when she thought he wasn't looking. She noticed the way he laughed when he was genuinely happy, how his eyes lit up when he talked about things he loved. Every small moment felt charged with possibility. Ethan was patient with her, never rushing or pressuring. He seemed to understand that trust and feelings couldn't be forced. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, just sharing space, each waiting for the other to say what neither was quite ready to say aloud. One evening, after a late dinner, Ethan took her hand in his for the first time, not a quick brush, but a steady, intentional hold. Emily's heart jumped, and she looked up at him, surprised but not pulling away. The warmth of his hand was electric, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. "Emily," Ethan whispered, his voice low and steady. "I care about you. More than I probably should." Her breath caught. The words she had been afraid to hear were finally spoken. But instead of fear, she felt a cautious hope. "I don't know what this means for us," Ethan continued, "but I don't want to pretend anymore. I want to be honest with you, with myself." Emily nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Me too." That night, they sat close together on the porch swing, hands entwined, watching the stars appear in the dark sky. Neither of them spoke much, but their hearts said everything. The future was uncertain, tangled with questions and doubts. Could they find a way to be more than family? Could they navigate the complexities of their feelings without breaking what they already had? Emily didn't have the answers, but she knew one thing for sure: she was no longer alone. Ethan was there, beside her, sharing her pain and hope, and sometimes that was enough. Their story was unfolding quietly, in moments of laughter, gentle touches, and whispered confessions. It was fragile and beautiful, filled with promise and the kind of love that could heal even the deepest wounds. As Emily lay in bed that night, she smiled softly to herself. Maybe, just maybe, this unexpected connection was the beginning of something extraordinary. Something worth taking a chance on, because sometimes most surprising love stories start where you least expect them, to two people learning to find their way home together. The days after their quiet confession were filled with a new kind of tension, one that was both thrilling and uncertain. Emily and Ethan had crossed an invisible line, and now they had to figure out what it meant. Neither of them rushed to define it, but the way they looked at each other, the way they lingered a moment longer when their hands touched, spoke volumes. The easy silence they once shared was now charged with unspoken feelings and possibilities. Emily struggled with the confusing emotions swirling inside her. Part of her felt guilty after all. Ethan was her stepbrother, and they were family now in a way. But the heart rarely obeyed rules. And she couldn't deny the warmth that spread through her every time he smiled or reached out to her. She found herself daydreaming about what might happen if they allowed themselves to explore this connection. Could love really grow between them? Would it survive the complicated reality they lived in? Ethan was just as conflicted. He was careful, not wanting to pressure Emily or risk hurting the fragile bond they'd built. But every day he spent near her made it harder to hide what he felt. He admired her strength, her kindness, and the way she faced her fears with quiet courage. Slowly he realized that what started as a simple gesture-making dinner, lending a sweater, had become something much deeper. And now he didn't want to hold back anymore. One afternoon, after a busy morning, Ethan suggested they go for a walk in the nearby woods. It was a place they both loved but rarely visited together. Emily agreed, eager for a chance to breathe fresh air and escape the weight of their unspoken feelings, as they walked among the tall trees. Sunlight filtering through the leaves, the world seemed to slow down. The peaceful sounds of birds and rustling leaves wrapped around them, giving their thoughts space to roam. They talked about everything and nothing work, dreams, fears, memories from childhood. But beneath their words was the quiet awareness of the growing bond between them. At one point, Ethan stopped and reached out, gently tucking a stray strand of Emily's hair behind her ear. She looked up at him, their eyes meeting in a moment that felt both electric and tender. "Emily," he said softly, "I don't want to hide how I feel anymore." Her heart pounded, but she nodded. "Neither do I." They stood close, the space between them shrinking until it disappeared. And then, slowly, carefully, they leaned into each other, sharing their first kiss, a gentle, hesitant touch that held all the hope and fear of something new. The kiss wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was the beginning of something they both wanted but had been too afraid to admit. From that day forward, their relationship deepened. They spent more time together, sharing quiet evenings at home, cooking meals, watching movies, and simply being near each other. Their touches grew bolder but always respectful, never rushed. They learned to communicate not just with words, but with small gestures, a hand on the back, a look that said, "I'm here." But the world outside their home wasn't always kind to complicated love stories. Emily worried about what her mother would think if she knew how close they had become. Ethan wondered if their family could ever accept what was happening between them. They both knew they faced challenges, but the choice to be honest with their feelings felt worth the risk. One night, Emily found herself sitting on the porch, staring at the stars, lost in thought. Ethan joined her quietly, sitting close enough that their shoulders touched. "Do you think we can make this work?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan took her hand in his. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'm willing to try if you are." She smiled, feeling a wave of relief. "I am." Their honesty brought them closer, but it also meant facing the reality of their situation. They decided to talk to Emily's mother together, hoping for understanding but preparing for difficult questions. The conversation was tense at first. Emily's mother was surprised and unsure how to react. She needed time to process, but she saw the sincerity in both of them and promised to try to understand. That night, Emily and Ethan sat side by side, grateful for the small victory. They knew their journey wouldn't be easy, but they were ready to face it together. As summer turned to fall, their love grew stronger. They supported each other through ups and downs, celebrating small victories and comforting each other during hard times. Their relationship wasn't perfect, but it was real, built on trust, respect, and a deep connection. One crisp autumn evening, Ethan surprised Emily with a picnic under the golden trees. They laughed, shared stories, and watched the sunset paint the sky with colors that felt like a promise. I never thought I'd find this, Emily said softly, leaning into him. Neither did I, Ethan replied, holding her close. But I'm glad we did. Their love was quiet but powerful and gentle force that helped them heal and grow as they walked home. Hand in hand, Emily felt a peace she hadn't known in years. The future was uncertain, but with Ethan by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. Their story was far from over. It was still unfolding, full of challenges, hopes, and the kind of love that could change everything. And in that moment, beneath the fading light of a perfect day, Emily knew one thing for sure. Sometimes, the most unexpected love stories are the ones worth holding on to forever.